Give him a piece of your mind." Ash leaned into him, her lips pursed, and for a moment he panicked, staggering back. Everything seemed to weigh suddenly on her shoulders. Her unknown bear. The sinking feeling that was ever present in her chest. "Prude." A loud slap rang out across the library. Ash stood above Hector, her eyes alight with fury. Hector's head was turned to one side, the skin growing red on one cheek.
"That was a decent blow, although this is not the training grounds."
She slapped him again, this time with the other hand.
"If you like, I can give you pointers on the best way to do real damage."
The response made her even more furious.
Why can't you just get angry at me?
What benefit would that provide us with?
Maybe then they could fight it out and what? With a sigh, Ash collected her belongings and marched out of the library. Hector just stood there looking confused. Somewhere in the back of her mind, guilt began to set in. For now though, a tiny smirk curled her lips and letting loose a bit of her fury brought her a tiny fraction of peace. She silently wondered how long it would last. The next day, Ash woke up early. She donned the only pair of pants she owned and a dress short enough to be mistaken for a shirt. Why did she own a dress like that anyway? Prude likely gave it to her ages ago. Heading out of the dorms, she marched down the mountain stairs and towards the Paladin's barracks. Not a soul crossed her path as she made her trek. Reaching the practice yard, she armed herself with a wooden sword from one of the many racks. Holding it forward, she gave a few sheepish swings, trying to judge its balance. Satisfied, she began to practice. It wasn't long after that the first of the Paladin trainees began to arrive. They looked at her with a mixture of confusion and bemused expressions. They left her alone save for when she caught the occasional bout of laughter. She could only assume it was at her expense. It had been a very long time since she last held a blade.
Ash?
Ash stopped, wiping sweat from her brow.
Hey. Why are you out here? I want to learn to fight.
Prude narrowed her eyes.
You want to learn to fight? Why? I have my reasons. Necromancers don't fight.
I fight.
Ash hadn't seen him approach. If there were any lingering feelings over their encounter from yesterday, he failed to show them.
Okay, fine. Well, most necromancers don't fight.
Hello, Ash.
Ash felt whatever emotion had compelled her to come here this morning drain away.
I didn't realize that you trained here.
Where else would I go to fight?
That makes sense. That's why I'm here. I was thinking of trying to, I'm not sure, become stronger.
That's good. I was worried that you were coming here for me after that incident yesterday.
Yes, where I taught you a thing or two about manners.
I hadn't realized that was what that was.
What was?
Veronica here saw fit to strike me across the face.
What?
Prude wheeled to face Ash.
Why would you do that, Ash?
Hector here had overstepped his bounds and ignored propriety.
Ash glared at Hector.
I merely reacted in kind.
Ash, what in the name of all 17 hells makes you think you have the right to react like that? 1, you know Hector is a bit different. He can't help how awkward he is. 2, you attacked him, unprovoked. At least not physically. I don't know why you would think that would ever be okay with anyone.
You punched him to make him go to bed.
And finally, 3, that's different.
How?
It was for his own good.
Ash flushed, but tried her best to maintain a grim expression.
Do you understand?
Do not presume to lecture me, Prudence. You may be my best friend, but I do not—
No. You are my best friend, so it gives me every single right to correct you, especially when you're being a piking bitch.
Hector drew in a sharp breath. Ash's own breath caught in her throat. Before Ash even knew what she was doing, she swung her wooden training sword at Prudence. She blocked it with an easy, almost casual parry. With a roar, Ash stepped forward, swinging again. Again, Prudence knocked the blow away with the ease of one who was playing with a child. Ash held up her blade in both hands, roared, then stopped. Prudence had tears in her eyes. The blade fell from Ash's hand, sinking dull-edged blade first into the mud. She stepped forward and the two embraced, tears rolling from Ash's eyes as well.
So the first thing you need to do is practice a better stance, Ash. Also, as powerful as your blows were, a smaller, thinner blade would likely suit you better.
Shut up, Heck.
Okay.
The sound of heavy boots mucking through the practice field towards them drew Ash to look up from Prude, their embrace ending. Zachariah stood, scowling.
Another rot-sucker here to waste the time of my recruits?
I believe to waste their time, I'd have to be a bad fighter who was holding them back in training somehow, and not someone who has trounced you. Twice.
Hector's eyes oozed metaphorical venom as he glared towards Zachariah. Ash silently thanked the light and shadows it was only metaphorical venom, remembering a particularly unfortunate accident during the early days of her Nox training. She was glad that blind Distortion had adapted so well.
Whenever you open your mouth, Mr. Warlock, you seem desperate to give me excuses to kick you and your girlfriend out.
Wait, why would you kick out Prudence? Wouldn't Ash and I make more sense?
Prude's eyes became saucers, and her entire face turned as scarlet as her hair. Ash tried to feel happy for her, but could only feel resentment that it was that man who made Prude feel that way.
Light and shadows, Mr. Warlock, you are impossibly dense.
Zachariah simply shook her head and walked away, cursing under her breath about idiot children.
Huh. I was expecting that confrontation to be more dramatic.
I think she's as sick of you as I am.
I'm sorry about that.
Goddess, do not apologize. I don't want to see you roll over so easily.
You likely could, if you were to ask him.
Ash wheeled about to find Elfnod.
I did not realize we had plans to train here this morning. Is Belinda expected?
No, we aren't doing ritual training here. Just normal training.
A thought occurred to Ash. Perhaps if she could.
Hector, would you care to spar?
Ash, I don't think that's...
I would be glad to.
No, don't go easy on my account.
Ash followed Hector's earlier advice and swapped to a lighter sword, crouching into a familiar fighting stance. Hector assumed position opposite her on the field.
Hector, ignore what she said, go easy on her.
No, please. I'd like the chance to see exactly what you're capable of, Mr. Warlock.
Ash smirked. It had indeed been a long time since she had last held a blade. Many of her lessons were gone from her mind, but in youth she and Prude had spent nearly all their time sparring with the King's Swordmaster. Hector may have had more recent experience, but once she fell into the groove of familiarity, she was confident she would.
Begin!
Hector did not even seem to shift his weight. His feet did not even scrape the ground as he hurtled at her, a dark meteor. Reflexively, she raised her blade to block. He brought around his own training weapon, a wooden greatsword as long as he was tall, and she felt her weapon free from her grip. Spiderweb lines of pain spread across her chest as both her blade and his own impacted her with a force that brought back flashes of being kicked by a horse. She hit the mud and gasped. The wind was gone from her.
Hector!
Prude was screaming, and a moment later her face swam wetly in Ash's line of sight.
I told you to hang back!
But she asked me not to. Twice.
Heavily calloused hands groped her chest where the weapons had struck.
Nothing serious. One of her ribs may be broken, but she'll live.
Thank the goddess. It was oddly comforting to know it was Elfnod who was checking her. She wasn't sure how she would feel if one of the others had. A burning warmth suddenly spread through her, oddly familiar. Her breath returned. Ash sat up, her vision growing steady.
Did you just heal me?
No, Elfnod wants to become a healer, but he's just an enhancement specialist at the moment, much like Zachariah herself.
No, Zachariah is a self-enhancement specialist, by far the least elegant and base of magical forms. Elfnod is highly skilled at enhancing others. He will one day be a phenomenal physicianal mage, if not a healer.
You flatter me too much, Hector. And here I thought you had decided you had no interest in men.
I don't. I'm trying to court Prudence.
Once again Prude turned deep red. As though all at once, it became more than Ash could take.
You'll have to excuse me.
Are you not going to continue training, Veronica?
It's Ash, and no. I've already been out here long enough.
With a curt nod to Prude, Ash took her leave. Exiting from her changing room after her shower, Ash found Prude sitting on her bed, playing with one of the semi-wild cats that roamed the mountain.
Oh, I didn't expect you to be here.
I wanted to talk.
A chill ran down Ash's spine. Then a flash of anger. This was getting ridiculous. She couldn't go an hour without getting ominous chills.
You okay?
I'm fine, it's nothing. What did you want to talk about?
Prudence took in a deep breath.
You like Hector, I know. I don't. I don't like him, that is. I don't really know how I feel about him, though. I don't trust him, but I can't say much more. Prudence.
Oh, this is important if you're using my actual name.
Please don't. Not yet. There's something about Hector I just can't trust.
Don't worry, I'll be careful.
Prudence got up, carrying the cat.
I'll see you at breakfast.
She gave Ash a smile, and Ash returned it. Ash watched her go. She stood there, still, trying to find something to ease her worries. With her mind a turbulent storm of thoughts, she couldn't quite manage to find an appetite and instead pulled out her notes. She would work on her research. Or at least she would work on it until she felt better. She prayed that she would feel better. The tendril slowly uncoiled, the brown washing away, fading to a violent green. Then the leaf began to uncurl. Its dry, brown surface began to wash with emerald that then seemed to stain, ebbing to a pure black. The plant stood as erect and tall as it had in life. The regret she had for letting it die several months ago began to fade.
I can't believe it worked.
Ash scrawled wildly into her notes as she spoke the same words aloud.
And it works in the exact same manner as reanimation.
She stared at the phoenix mark on her hand.
Meaning that somewhere out there, my pair is supplementing my power. If they were only a bit closer, I could reanimate something larger. A tree, perhaps.
That's rather amazing. It looks much healthier than anything else I have seen reanimated.
Elfnod stroked one of the leaves, cocking an eyebrow.
Yes, that's odd.
You're sure it's not like a golem?
No. You see, golems are completely different. They're not restored to any semblance of life, they're more like puppets. Yes, there's bodies underneath the armor or clay forms you often see them in, but that's because you can't even turn false life into false bodies. There's just something about organic matter that lets it hold on to that spark.
Oh, could you make a tree golem?
I don't know. I'm not actually a specialist in golems. The only one I've ever made was during my trials.
You know, I could have used your help with the plants I kept in my room on the island. They're all dead, too.
Well, I'm not even sure of the practical uses of this spell yet. Are these plants, for example, safe to eat? Will they eventually die again like most reanimations? Or can undead plants persist because they're not constrained to such a delicately balanced body structure and system as what we typically reanimate?
Are you asking me?
No, I understand. You're still learning even the basics of paladin magic.
I've actually already advanced a class, passed my trials so easily that my instructor is preparing the next set. Hector has been an excellent tutor.
Yes, I hear he's quite skilled.
Ash rolled her eyes.
I had thought you were avoiding them because of your feelings, but if I had known the advances you had been making on your research, I am sorry for assuming the worst. This is amazing!
Looking up from the plant, Elfnod gave a hopeful look.
Can I keep one?
Oh, yes, sure. Please do.
Thank you.
He lifted the black-leafed plant and held it up reverently as he examined it.
Do you want to get breakfast?
It's breakfast time?
Were I to not know better, I would say you were spending too much time with Hector.
Yes, well, hopefully he's not still skipping sleep researching my mark.
No, that enthusiasm seems to be spent on his time with us.
How are you and Belinda getting along?
She's a good girl.
Belinda? This is the same Belinda, right?
She is. She's got a thick and spiky shell, but underneath it, she's just a girl who didn't ever expect to be here, let alone be here for as long as she has. She's actually quite sweet.
Now I'm convinced Hector found a way to manipulate people's minds.
No, I think that a few months spent with each other is enough to help you recognize the good parts of others, and to have them grow on you.
Elfnod gestured with the plant as he smiled.
Speaking of spending time, how much more time will Heck need you?
Later today is our last session, actually.
Ash raised her eyebrows.
The coincidences will never cease, eh? Do you want to attend the ritual? There's a lot of people who have heard about it. Even a few graduates have returned to the mountain to attend.
Yes, actually. I'd like to actually see what you have been working on.
You should bring one of your plants. Mr. Warlock would light like a pyre.
Light like a pyre?
It means to get excited. Witches used to have rituals where the very skilled among us would be burnt on a pyre.
What?
There were components to protect them from the flames. I don't really know how it worked. I wasn't much of a witch, if you remember.
That sounds terribly useful. Immunity to flames?
I don't even know if it was those particular flames or flames in general. Might have even been an illusion. No one did the ritual while I was there.
Ash felt her stomach rumble.
I think I need to get some food.
I will go with you. Bring a plant. I'm heading to training right after.
Sure.
Ash chose a pot in which nestled a tiny black bush with a rose as dark as ink.
Let's go.
The two wove through the catacombs of the mountain and found their way to the kitchen. Outside, spattered across the tables that served as the dining room, the few remaining morning stragglers finished their meals. At one, Ash found Belinda, sitting across from Hector and Prude. Ash grabbed a bowl of the stew proffered by the tall and thin cook who stood behind the counter. He gave her a wide grin and a second helping.
I didn't see you yesterday. You can't skip meals.
Ah, thanks.
Knowing that this person was worrying about her made her feel oddly content. She joined the group a moment later.
Hey, gang.
She might as well try to play nice. She missed Prudence.
We're a gang now? Ooh, I wasn't aware we were participating in illegal activities.
The comment garnered a laugh from the group, and Prude lay her head on Hector's shoulder.
I honestly don't know if you're joking or asking, and somehow that makes it funnier.
The only thing criminal is the amount of studying I have done over my winter break.
I assure you there is no legal limit to studying, else I would have found it.
Belinda groaned, but her face brightened when Elfnod arrived behind Ash.
Mind if we join you?
Please, have a seat. Where have you been? I swear I haven't seen you in what must have been months.
I kind of got caught up in my research.
Is that why you have that rose?
Hector's eyes widened.
Did you figure it out? Can I see it?
Ash offered the small pot and Hector took it with the care one might handle the most fragile of glass.
Oh my.
Hector went silent as he buckled over the plant.
Well, I hope you didn't need to talk to him. He's going to be silent for the next half an hour just looking at it.
Prude gave the plant a glance herself.
Reanimation?
Yeah.
I thought you had to have your pair to perform reanimation.
There haven't been many tests to determine the range at which a pairing can share magic.
I estimate the upper limit is outside of any reasonable test range.
Oh, he's actually paying attention.
I know better than to ever completely ignore you.
Aw, that's sweet.
Ash was surprised how little it bothered her to see Prude kiss Hector on the cheek.
Time is the greatest of healers.
What was that?
Nothing.
Looking across the table, she found surprise elsewhere, catching Belinda lay moon eyes on Elfnod. That couldn't end well.
So, what was the trick?
Trick?
I mean, how did you do it?
I'm still a little bit shocked he's actually talking.
There wasn't a trick. I had to completely develop a new spell type.
Would you be willing to teach it to me?
I might as well learn it too, if you're offering.
I think I want to do some more research before I start sharing the spell.
Ash braced herself, expecting Hector to refuse such a flimsy excuse. Instead he nodded.
I understand. Just tell me if you need help.
Sure, thanks.
So, Elfie, are you ready for the ritual?
Yes, of course.
What's so special about your session today? Elfnod said something about performing a ritual?
That's because we are. We're actually going to be performing the pairing ritual.
Ash's eyes grew wide.
Don't worry. They've actually done it twice before. And while they weren't well trained enough to complete it successfully, they were not compatible.
I imagine the heads would attempt to stop me were they to think I would be creating pairs outside of the early ritual.
Hector, Warlock, what did I tell you about the heads?
Hector turned from the plant and blushed.
Treat my elders with more respect.
Yes, now stop acting like you intend to overthrow the orders.
Yes. No, you are right. I am sorry.
Prude gave Ash a wink. Apparently she had tamed the savage beast.
Not that I couldn't if I wanted to.
Hector screamed to the hall in general. Mostly tamed, at least. Ash finished her stew and let out a sigh. She hadn't been eating properly, and the extra serving had helped. The cooks here were disturbingly observant sometimes. For a moment she wondered if there was a magic to cooking, and if perhaps the head cook Mistress Geisthund was some sort of head herself. Ash dismissed the idea and watched as Hector finished his third bowl.
Looks like everyone is here. Should we head straight to the garden?
Can I keep the flower?
Sure.
I will call it George.
You don't need to name plants, Heck.
George!
Mostly tame.
I shouldn't need to tell you what to do. Begin.
Belinda took in a deep breath, and for a moment, the garden hung in silence. Even after having been old, Ash was surprised to see she wasn't the only spectator. There were at least another 24 students, and judging by the few pairs sticking to the back, at least 2 graduates. Elfnod flared with such an intense, flaming white light that a gasp ran through the crowd. The amount of power he produced easily rivaled that of any graduate, and somehow that made Ash flush with pride by proxy for her friend and recent confidant. Belinda took another deep breath, but nothing happened to her. Elfnod's light began to pour forth, beginning to bridge the distance between him and Belinda. Hector's face was bleached by that light, as his eyes darted wildly and he silently mouthed something. Belinda's third breath seemed to tear shadow from the earth beneath her, coiling up and around with tendrils of pitch darkness. Extending a hand, the tendrils coiled around her arm and reached outwards. Ash was shocked that 2 months ago these two had been remedial students. This control of their energy showed an amount of technique reserved for the likes of heads. As soon as the two touched, there was a flare, and an explosion. She had been prepared. Prude and Hector had warned her to brace herself, though they had not provided the luxury of that warning to any of the other attendants. While the rest of the crowd was drawing themselves back to their feet, Hector looked over the pair with a smile of satisfaction.
8,312 meters.
Would you mind explaining exactly how you calculated that?
Came a voice from the crowd. A commotion began to rise before a sudden bark of excitement broke over the noise.
I have a mark!
Silence fell like a hammer.
What?
Elfnod turned to Ash with a grin and revealed a black flower on the back of his hand.
Rather pretentious, no?
Belinda was beside him in a moment, showing Ash the same mark.
You have to teach me your spell now! It's fate!
The two exchanged hands, looking at each other's marks. Their eyes met and they smiled.
Well, Ash, we should probably pack. We're going to be thrown out.
Ash looked for Hector, already gone from where he had stood before.
Where did Hector go?
I told him under no circumstance would he be allowed to overthrow the orders, and that when we got thrown out, we had to leave. He said he needed to pack. Do you need anything specific from your room?
No, not really. I have everything I really need memorized. Clothes, I suppose?
A small part of her regretted not going to retrieve healing plants, but it was childish to cling to such fancies.
Meh. My mother will buy us some new equipment.
Ash watched as a number of the students began to retreat, fear on their faces. The graduate pair from earlier was gone.
Do you have any idea of what you have done?
The voice from earlier. Ash looked for its origin, finding a thin woman bearing down on the retreating Hector.
The ramifications of this are far beyond any of your earlier antics.
Nissa, this is not the time.
I am sure you think this will be seen as a good thing, but your variation of the ritual will be far from it. The ease with which your ritual can be performed will create situations where casters, entirely unprepared to become a mage, will pair. The kind of power gained through a pairing will create pseudo-mages with far more power than training. I think we may be able to prevent this kind of behavior in the mountain, but can't you see?
Nissa, stop.
The woman glared, remaining silent for a moment. Hector used the moment of silence to continue his retreat, and in less time than it took her to continue her tirade, he was gone.
Fool.
Nissa spoke as she watched him go. With narrowed, predatory eyes, she turned to meet the gaze of Ash. A shiver ran down Ash's spine as their eyes met, and she quickly turned away to let out a short string of obscenities over the shiver. Did she need to wear more layers or something? This was getting ridiculous. When Ash turned back, she saw Nissa was marching towards her, purpose in her movements and expression. No, she was mistaken. She wasn't coming to her, she was coming to.
Prude, is it? Prudence Celeste, royal princess and heir to the Celeste throne.
That's right.
I cannot determine from what little I know of you why you might be paired to someone like him. You certainly don't appear to be cut from the same cloth.
How can you?
Perhaps it's a situation of opposites attracting. You're paired under the mark of the spider, no? Which one of you is the spider, and which is caught in the web, I wonder?
Ash readied herself for a shiver, and was pleased to find that it didn't come. She silently celebrated a victory as she continued to watch the interaction.
Neither. Mark reading is purely nonsense. More importantly, who are you?
This is Nissa. She's a graduate from the same class as Hector.
Ah, and you are?
Ash.
The woman's eyes snapped back to Ash, now gleaming with recognition. Ash tried to casually hide her hand behind her back. Nissa nodded curtly, looking away.
Ash here is correct. I was in Hector's class. I graduated as a poison and venom specialist. Were it not for Hector, I would have been top of my class. I would have been the top of any class in the last 10 years if not for him. It is hard to believe he still performed so well amidst his, how shall we say, antics.
Antics?
It's hard to believe his reputation is not so well remembered. Likely for the best.
Ash waited for Nissa to explain further, but she merely grew silent instead.
Venom and poison specialist, how is that useful?
An ignorant question. Surely you are aware that most mundane medicines are a poison of one sort or another, if used improperly. The same holds true for poisons. In the appropriate application of a venom or poison, one can heal. My partner is a masterful healer. Combined, I would argue we are the most prominent healers on the continent.
Isn't Hector a knock specialist? Doesn't that mean he has the same speciality as you?
Nissa tried to hold back a scowl.
Admittedly, in a way he does. But claiming to be a knock specialist is like claiming to be a magic specialist. It is claiming specialization in an enormous category. It's a ridiculous title. That having been said, I have no doubt that given whatever he is, he could replicate what I do, and more.
What he is?
I should not have said that. It was rude of me.
As the din of the crowd grew, Nissa looked about, then turned back to Ash.
I must take my leave, as, enlightening as this was, I would rather not suffer the fallout due from the heads.
She slinked away, a shape half hidden behind the pillars of the courtyard falling into step immediately behind her. Scanning the pillars, Ash realized with a start that the cook from earlier was there, the one who had given her an extra helping. The cook's eyes fell not on the fresh pear, nor on Prude, but on herself. She started towards him, but the crowd broke her line of sight, and in the faintest flutter of a heartbeat, he was gone. Ash wheeled around, trying to follow the boy's path.
How long do you think before the heads show up and kick us out?
Ash turned to Elfnod and Belinda, who were still speaking with joint enthusiasm. Oddly appropriate that the oldest students should end up paired.
I doubt much longer.
As though life were some cosmic play and the words were an actor's cue, the heads arrived.
Where is he?
Ash had never seen such rage in Luciana. She had always been the voice of reason between the two. Zakaria was manic, in the sense she was actually smiling.
You! What are you doing here? To your room!
She shouted at a passing student observer.
You!
Luciana's eyes locked with Ash.
Somehow I feel I should have known you were a part of this. I am sorry for your issues with your mark, but you cannot be involved in things like this. You must leave immediately.
Luciana's head snapped to Prudence. Zakaria stepped towards the group, practically cooing as she spoke.
Hector is to be punished. When we catch him, we will strip him of his magic. As his pair, you will suffer the same fate.
No, Zachariah! We cannot do so much, not to her!
No, you cannot.
Hector had returned, though from where he had come, Ash could not say. A backpack and a sword that pained Ash's eyes, shimmering either white or black as the light struck, were all he carried.
You dare to bring such a thing here?
Hector slid the blade free and held its point directly at Zakaria.
You touch her and you will see exactly how much I dare.
Venom dripped from his every syllable with a noxious toxicity that seemed to leave the air stained with malice.
Hector, let's get out of here!
We're coming too.
Yeah!
You steal our students now, Hector. Do you truly intend to try to overthrow the orders?
Boy, you think yourself strong, but you have no concept of the true power we hold.
That sounds ominous.
Believe me, girl, it is. I do not boast, but Hector, we have never really tried to harm you. Do not doubt we could.
I have no interest in your order anymore. There's so much more out there, up there. I am done here.
For a moment, they all merely stood. Ash readied herself for the coming fight. Instead, Zakaria turned away, slowly.
Get out, now!
A glow began to burn within her. Ash felt it as much as she could see it.
Enhancement magic. Is that all of which a head is capable?
I will snap you in half, boy.
I would love to see...
He did not finish his words as Prude gagged him, violently, and began to lead the small party's retreat.
We're leaving! Thank you, heads!
They made their escape in silence. Ash was in open air before she had really thought to move her feet. The smell of a storm brewed in the distance.
Are we gonna be okay?
We have 5 of the best mages in the mountain. We'll be better than okay.
Hector and Prude seemed both ill at ease. The high spirits of Belinda and her partner did not seem to be capable of being dampened. Ash merely wondered why she was there.
We'll be great.
The rain fell down on them with a torrential force that left the world around them soft.
You're so useless, Elfnod.
Her voice feigned humor, but the sharp edge to the tone told the truth behind the words.
I am sorry. Shielding is one of my weakest skills.
I am also sorry. I have nothing in my kit that could provide cover from rain.
I don't really expect any of you three to provide a solution.
Prude's hands were above her head, a shield casting aside rain as it fell. The gesture was technically unneeded, but it had always helped her focus.
Unless... Ash, do you think you can grow an oak?
Sure, got a dead one around here.
The vast fields that surrounded the isolated mountain left no such growths.
I am glad we stopped walking, though. That muck would be awful to march through.
If only we had a witch.
A witch requires living or fresh-picked plants for their spells. I think we'd be in the same boat even with a witch.
Hector grumbled. A flash of lightning crawled across the sky and bleached the earth in a pale blue light. In that flare, Ash caught sight of a figure in the distance. Pale gray robes, hooded, standing stock still, and then as the light faded, lost to the darkness.
There's someone out there.
Who would be fool enough to follow us in this weather?
The lightning burst across the sky, and in that pale light, there was nothing. She was sure she had seen someone. Her finger pointed to the spot just as lightning struck again. There was nothing.
What did you see?
A figure in a pale cloak.
The group stared out into the darkness. Hector shifted, his eyes betrayed the fear he hid from his face. He drew his strange sword and offered it to Prude. She took it without a word.
We move.
Oh, what about the mud?
We will have to deal with it.
You can't be serious.
Elfnod took in a deep breath, and a small burst of white wrung out from his body. Ash's fatigue faded slightly.
Wow, already learning to heal?
It's not much, but it'll help us last the night.
I wish I had a dead horse.
With that, the group began to march, the dry patch quickly growing thick with mud behind them. The sun had crawled high into the sky. The ground was still thick with mud, but their feet no longer sank so deeply.
I think we should have brought food.
There are a few meals in my backpack.
When were you going to share that information?
When I felt safe again.
Hector, we aren't all as capable as you in the regard of stamina. We need a break.
Hector turned to Prude, who nodded. Taking stock of herself, Ash was surprised to find she was far less tired than she should be. Had Elfnod been assisting her through the night? Judging by the ragged nature of both him and his pair, she doubted it. She dared not say it, but the pursuant Grey Mage may be responsible for her vigor. Ash felt a hint of pride that the thought did not send a shiver down her spine. She was getting better at suppressing those. Hector retrieved a number of capped pitchers, clearly stolen from the cafeteria, and began to offer them around.
The stew from yesterday. When did you get this?
The young cook who watched the ritual gave them to me. I suppose he was as aware as anyone else as to the events that were about to transpire.
Ash raised her eyebrows.
Hey, speaking of transpiring, what happened last night? What's so scary about someone in a pale cloak?
Belinda, that's the traditional garb of a Grey Mage.
Belinda's eyes darted the way they came and she slowly took a draw from her pitcher.
We made enough tracks that a blind child could follow us.
Hiding won't work on a Grey Mage. They can sense magic in much the way the Rod of Finding can.
That's why we were so keen to run, Belinda.
Then what if you stop?
Belinda took a long draw from her pitcher, and offered it back to Hector as she stood up.
Let's go!
The rest of the group emulated the gesture.
We need to move quickly.
Why is a Grey Mage interested in us?